Coming up on the Together for Good podcast, I want to talk about the healing power of rituals in our lives and the ways that our sacred practices and spiritual practices really can carry us through the difficult moments in life. Here we go. Welcome to the Together for Good podcast, a podcast created by Bethany Lutheran Church in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado, and hosted by me, Pastor Nate Preisinger. On Together for Good, our goal is to provide practical, engaging content that supports you without expectations. Whether you're feeling disconnected from traditional religion or simply exploring what faith means in your life, we're here to walk alongside you. No matter where you are on your journey of faith, we're glad you're here. Welcome to Together for Good. The healing power of ritual. I have continually, as I've grown, become more and more amazed at how helpful and important our different spiritual practices and rituals really are for just carrying us through all the ups and downs of life. Obviously, ritual is really exciting and fun because it's things to look forward to, and they give a rhythm and an identity and a feel to every part of the year. People love the season of Advent leading into Christmas, and then all the little rituals that come around Christmas time. It seems like everyone thinks that their way of doing Christmas is the absolute best, even though almost all of the ways look exactly the same. But it's so important for you because it's the way that your family remembers and celebrates this season and this holiday. And so it's just has these familiar refrains, if you will, that you revisit year after year after year. One of the things that I recently started doing, probably about 10 years ago now, actually, is trying to develop more rituals for my family, but also just as a way to get the most out of life, to get the most enjoyment out of it. It all started when I realized how much I enjoyed the pumpkin spice latte at Starbucks when it came out. And it would drop every August, which is too early in my mind. And so I would hold off until about mid-September when it really started to feel like fall. And then I would go through the tradition, the ritual of getting my pumpkin spice latte. And there was just something that tasted so good about it. It increased and amplified the experience. And that's what rituals can do for us. But I need to go even deeper than that. I feel like this is the surface level of rituals, is that yes, they can amplify an experience and they can provide a rhythm to our life, something to look forward to, something to continually practice in the same way so it becomes familiar and it just has this sense of warmth and security attached to it. But the part that I've been reflecting on the past several weeks is the ways that rituals can carry us when we don't really know what the next step actually is. As many of you likely know, my mother became really sick and she recently passed away just a couple of weeks ago. And I was able to be there during the final weeks of her life as she went into hospice care and eventually passed away. And those are always going to be these holy and sacred moments that I'll cherish, and just so grateful for that time that I had with her, especially towards the end, to say all that needed to be said. And what is so important to me about all of that is, my mom and I had such a good relationship. It's not like there was anything we needed to sort out or to resolve or to fix before she passed away. It just felt like we're in a good place. I love her and she loved me, and we had a really good relationship. And so a lot of the time that I had with her, I would spend, recounting memories and just telling her how much I appreciated the different things that she did for me throughout my life. But then there would be a lot of moments too where I wouldn't really have a lot to say. I talked about this in my sermon this last Sunday a little bit too. There would just be these moments where I didn't know how to fill the space, and yet I didn't want to leave because those moments felt so precious and important. And so I turned to ritual, and I would ask my mom, like, hey, is it okay if we say some prayers together? And rather than put the pressure on myself to try and come up with the words to say, I used this book of Celtic daily prayer. I think I've talked about it before on the podcast. And they have a liturgy for morning prayer and midday prayer and evening prayer. And so depending on the time of the day, I would just pray through one of these liturgies. And it was so important and it meant so much. And it gave me words to say that seemed meaningful and significant. And then I know mattered to my mom, and they mattered to me at the same time. And so in that way, these rituals were carrying me through those moments. And then similarly, one of the other things that I was able to do, I actually would be sing the words of Hold an Evening Prayer, which is this beautiful collection of songs meant for evening time. And, my mom and I have sung those together so many times, and she was too weak to sing them with me, but, we were sharing that worship experience together. And I just think that there is something so beautiful about our rituals, about liturgy itself, which often gets a bad rap as just being antiquated. And yet, I was so glad to have something to turn to and to fall back on, words to say and to offer that respected the holiness and the sacredness of those moments with my mom, and that I know were deeply meaningful for me, and I'm assuming were meaningful for her too, because they spoke about our shared faith. See, that's what I think ritual can do for us. One last story related to all this. I had the chance to go to the church where I grew up, because it was back home in the Albany, New York area, and went to the church on a Sunday morning just because I said, hey, I need to get out of the house and I just really want to go to church. And I arrived at the church about 5 minutes late, which was the family practice when I was growing up, was to always be 5 minutes late. And I sat in the very back because I just wanted to blend in. I don't usually get the chance to just sit in the back row. Shout out to all the back row folks at Bethany who sit back there every week. I see what you're doing. And sitting in the back row, and the worship service was nothing special. It's not like the music was amazing or the preaching was phenomenal. And it was very adequate. And it meant so much to me because there was just something more mysterious, something deeper going on in that space and in that time, given the emotional space that I was in. All of the things that I was wrestling with and worrying about, it just was so comforting to be in those pews that I grew up in, to smell the familiar smells of that particular church, and to just move through the rhythm of the Sunday morning liturgy, right? Like the church services in Lutheran churches, there's some nuance to it. Our 10 a.m. service at Bethany is definitely different than our 8:30, but they follow like a very similar and familiar rhythm. And I think that really matters. The one joke that people around here have heard me make that I say all the time is that I think one of the ways to really develop a love for Lutheran liturgy is to just do it for 30 years. And I really believe that to be true, is that these rituals and these practices, they become meaningful because you do them again and again and again and again. And it starts to just get into your DNA, into your bloodstream. It starts to become who you are. These are the words that you say. These are the prayers that you say that matter to your people. And that's what Christian worship is all about. The rhythms of our worship have been like this for about 1,700 years, 1,600 years or so. And yeah, there's a lot of nuance and variance, but the general gather, word, meal, sending, that like 4-part movement has been how Christians have worshiped for a long, long time. And so the ritual connects you with your history. And that's a big, broad meta history spanning centuries. And it connects you with your history of you as an individual, of like, yeah, I remember like sneaking into these pews 5 minutes late and having my mom like open the bulletin and point out where we were in the service. And now that all matters more than ever to me. And it's more special than ever because it connects me with her memory, while also connecting me with these big, deep promises that the ritual itself is speaking about. And that's really the thing with worship too, is it's connecting you to the promises of God that are so important. That's why it spans centuries, is because the ancestors before us thought this was so important and valuable for life that they wanted to pass it on to the next generation, and then the generation after that, and the generation after that. coming home from being out in New York, living through those 3 weeks, those 3 final weeks of my mother's life, one of the things I said to my kids when I got home is I just told them about my experience. And I said, I so desperately want to make sure that you kids grow up with a faith experience, because here's how it helped me and carried me in these really difficult times as I said goodbye to my mom. And I told them, like, I just want you to have stories and to have words and to have prayers that you can fall back on when it feels completely overwhelming, when you don't know what to say or what to do. That's what ritual does for us. It is healing just in the way that it gives you something deeply meaningful to turn to, that's familiar, and that doesn't take a lot of brain power or figuring out, because it's a ritual, because you've done it so many times, it's almost muscle memory, and yet it can still be so meaningful because of all the memory attached to it, because of all the significance and the promise attached to it. That's why I think all of this ritual stuff we do really does matter. And I know that probably at times it might feel boring or repetitive. That makes sense. But I encourage you to continually look for those deeper connections. What memories do you connect with the ritual? Who do you remember saying these words or these prayers with? Where did you last hear this passage of scripture read? Who was sitting beside you? What city were you in? And just notice how it becomes these deeply interwoven threads that connect us with other believers and other moments in time from all throughout history, right? Like the great communion of saints that we speak about in our creed. That's all interwoven in ritual as well, because we're connected and interwoven with the stories before us and the stories that'll come after us too. And that was just another piece of this whole puzzle, is kind of the way that time can fold in on itself. And that I always knew these words were important as I said them. You know, the prayers that I offered from the book of Celtic Daily Prayer, I've been saying those for years just on my own time. And I didn't know why, but they just always felt really meaningful and important. And part of that's because they're really beautifully written. But I wonder too, this sounds really woo-woo, but there's just a sense of I knew in the moment 10 years ago, 15 years ago, when I first started saying those prayers, these are important, these are beautiful, these are significant. And was the future folding in on itself at that point? Right? Was there this future idea that God was already setting into motion that I didn't realize, that these would be the prayers that I'd say as I said goodbye to my mom? Is that why they felt significant way back then? Is that I was having some sort of glimpse of their future importance? I don't know, but I think our faith speaks about that a lot, of the ways that things can be true right now and not yet. We talk at communion about the foretaste of the feast to come. Is there a part of that we glimpse as we move through our life of faith now, as we practice these rituals today? Do we start to glimpse their significance, and then they show up later on, and we start to more fully see exactly what God has been doing in our life through these practices? I'll leave you with that thought. Would love to hear your own stories about how ritual has carried you through difficult times. If you want to come on the podcast and talk about it, I would love to have the discussion with anyone that's willing to share those deep parts of themselves. Because I think there's just a lot of beauty attached to these practices that we have. And just a reminder too, these rituals of Lent and moving into Holy Week as well. I had Garth England on the podcast a while back, and he talked about the liturgical seasons and told these beautiful stories about the ways that our practice of Maundy, Thursday, and Good Friday really formed his faith. And those are rituals that we're going to revisit again this year, and that will hopefully touch someone else's life in really significant ways again this year. And that I'm sure as Garth joins us for worship on those days, it'll remind him of those initial moments where God tapped him on the shoulder as a young kid and started to form his life of faith. This is all the way that ritual can heal us and hold us as we make our way through this messiness of life, through the struggles and the pain and the grief and the loss. These practices hold us and carry us. And so if you're like finding yourself in a difficult moment, I would encourage you to get in touch with some of these spiritual practices and rituals that exist within a church community. We have so much, I've done so much talking on the podcast and in other spaces about spiritual practices. Yeah, those can become rituals too. Just the way that you continually reconnect yourself with the deep history and story and promises of our faith. That's what the practices do. And they can become mindless, and that might seem like a bad thing. And in the same sense, I think that's really valuable because sometimes the world or our life can be so overwhelming that we don't really know what to say or what to do. And so it's good to just have something to fall back on that carries you. Yeah, so there's a bunch of thoughts about ritual. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your patience with me too. I know I've put out a lot of rebroadcasts lately and we haven't had a new podcast in a while. It was because I've been out of town, and just appreciate the people of Bethany who have been so supportive, and the people beyond Bethany as well, of me during this really difficult time. And yeah, I'm so grateful for our faith, in particular at these moments that give me a sense of promises as it relates to my mom and her passing, and that have, carried me through difficult moments, and that will continue to carry me as I deal with the grief of her loss. But yeah, this one's for you, Mom. She appreciated rituals a lot too, and I know is part of the one who instilled all this within me. She would dye all of our food pink on Valentine's Day for breakfast. So I drink like pink milk and have like pink Pop-Tarts, and then do it again a month later for St. Patrick's Day, only it'd all be green, like little dumb rituals like that. But it made the day a little extra special. On top of course, the ritual of bringing my sisters and I to church every Sunday, 5 minutes late, so that we could encounter these century-old rituals and promises of faith to carry us through times like these. All right. Thanks for listening, everyone. As always, stay in peace.